Montana is one of my absolute favorite states in the world to hunt. The reason why? Well, it's probably the most game-rich environment of anywhere that I go. Now on this trip, I was headed to the Powder River. Now they have mule deer, whitetails, elk, antelope, but this time I was going after muleys. Now this was my very first trip ever after a mule deer, so I wanted to try it spot and stalk. Probably the most difficult way to get a mule deer, especially with a bow, but I was convinced if I put in the time, well, I knew I was in the right area. Now I was hunting with Powder River Outfitters with Ken Gressland. Ken is a great guy, but when he looked at me and said, "You better get ready to do some stalks, because it's gonna take at least 10 before you're probably successful." Well, I took that as a little bit of a challenge, and we decided to go out and start looking for muleys. Now this was an early season hunt, so a lot of the bucks are still in bachelor groups. Now this can be a good thing and a bad thing. The good thing is, well, when you do find a group of bucks, well, you're gonna have a big variety to pick from. The bad news is, well, when you find those bucks, there's gonna be a lot of eyes looking for you. And really, that's ultimately gonna be one of your biggest troubles, is trying to get in on a big group. You don't know where every buck is, and that's the biggest problem. You may spot 3, 4, 5 bucks, but there may be 1 or 2 eyes you don't see, and those are the ones that always bust you. When you're out looking for muleys, well, usually you're looking in places that are shaded. Muleys like to find the shade. They also like to go to an area where they're high above and can see. Well, this day, nothing like that was around. There were no mule deer in the shade or up high. Probably the reason why, it was super windy. We're talking 40, 50 mile an hour winds, and the muleys seemed to have disappeared. Well, getting a little frustrated, we decided to go check out another ranch, and there we saw them. An entire bachelor group of bucks all bedded up against a fence. Now this is probably one of the craziest places you'd ever see a big group of bucks, but that's where they were. The big winds, well, they had pushed them to this area, and apparently they felt hidden. Well, they weren't hidden enough, because we spotted them and it was time to make a game plan. As I was getting closer and closer to these bucks, well, I was feeling it. There were thorns, cactus, everything going into my forearms, but I could see these bucks and I wanted to get a closer look. Now as a bow hunter, I really wanted to be inside 20 yards, and I picked out a white little bush that was where I wanted to be. I figured that'd give me about a 20-yard shot. Now the ground, well, it looked pretty flat all the way up until right before I got to the mule deer. Right there was a small dip that actually went down, and I thought, okay, if I can get to that point, I should be pretty good. As I got down, I couldn't believe it. The mule deer were still there, had no clue I was coming in close, and I only had a few more yards to go. I got back down on my belly, crawled up, and as I looked, these mule deer were all still there. They're just calm as can be, and let's face it, I panicked. I got inside 20 yards, I had planned everything out. The only thing I didn't plan out, how on earth do you get to full draw from your belly? I hadn't accounted for that, and I decided to just try to draw, get to full draw, and stand up. Big mistake. I spooked the entire group. These guys were on their way out of there, and all I could do is watch as these giant racks ran away from me. Now, it's a little depressing to put in all that work, get up close, and realize you busted the entire thing. But that's exactly what happened. And you know what? It was my very first ever mule deer stalk, so not too bad. That was such a perfect stalk. That was so close. And to see those giants run away is almost impossible to believe that that many bucks, 6 bucks, were all here 15 to 20 yards from me, and I blew it.
Winchester's Deadly Passion is presented by Winchester Ammunition, Thompson Center, Cuddyback Digital, Bond Pod, Cabela's, She Outdoor Apparel, and hunter safety system.
Now when I scared that big group of bucks up, there was one whopper in there. Now he was a big framey thing, and maybe not everyone would like him, but I loved him. He didn't have a ton of points, but he was an absolute beautiful, big, old buck. When I watched him run away, well, my heart sank. I didn't think I'd ever see him again. When you spook a muley, well, usually they're in the next county, but not this buck. I ended up coming the very next day out to the same area, looking around, thought maybe we'd see these bucks. I saw an old barn there, no big deal. I jumped out to open the gate, and guess what was in there? That giant buck. He was using that barn as shade. Now that's super normal for Western muleys because they're looking for shade. Old barns are the perfect place.
Talk about a kick in the teeth. Blew the stock, they left. I thought they're probably in the next county by now. Drive up not, 500 yards. They're in a barn, an old barn. Who'd have figured? I thought for sure they were miles away. Gone, no such luck. We got the big one looking at me through the shed. If we'd had a better door set up, we could have locked them right in there. Well, maybe they didn't spook too bad and we can try it again, but what some luck.
As we scoured the area, we had decided this was an area we were really gonna focus our attention. There was a buck in there that I really wanted, and well, we had been close to him twice, so it wasn't impossible to get in on him. As we were looking around, we spotted what we thought could have been that mule deer or another mule deer in red type bushes. Now it jumped up, spooked out of there, but the good news is he didn't spook far this time. In fact, where he was headed, well, it was his old stomping grounds because that big old barn was just ahead, and the good news is we didn't see him go past it. Instead of just blowing up to the barn like we had before, this time we made a plan. Let's just count on the fact that he's in there. We hadn't seen him go past it, so there was a good chance that him and maybe all his buddies were partying right in the barn.
The first bale's gonna be just too far. Gotta get to that middle one. If I get set up there, it's gonna be like a 30, 40 yard shot. Look at the mass on this. First ever buck, mule deer buck with a bow.
Now I have to give a lot of credit to Ken Gresslin of Powder River Outfitters though, because, well, it wasn't exactly the first stock, and like he said in the beginning, it might have been at least the 10th stock by that point in time. But he never gave up on me. Every time we saw another buck, he said, go after him and best of luck. And you know what? Eventually it worked out. This is a perfect example of how persistence paid off, and I got to go home with a beautiful Powder River mule deer.
Tip of the week is brought to you by Canny. The facts say a lot, but the ride says it all.
If you plan to do a Western spot and stock hunt, there are certain things you can do before the hunt to help your chances of success. Now, one of the main things is you need to remember your shots may be a little longer. This isn't your average whitetail hunt where shots are 20 yards and in. You're out west in the big, wide open country, so you better be prepared for 50, 60-yard shots. Now, that doesn't mean you're gonna have to take shots that far, it just means you wanna be ready for them. If you can get into 30 yards, all the better, and you'll be that much more prepared. Now, another thing is you wanna keep your draw weight low. The reason why? Well, you're probably gonna be doing some belly crawling, and you may have to get to full draw from your side. So you wanna make sure you have a bow that's set low enough that you can draw on your side and slowly sit up. Now, this is gonna take a little practice, but it's something that can be a huge help out in the field. Now, another thing, when you're belly crawling, you wanna use your bow to help you out. Now, there's tons of snakes and all sorts of things out there. So when you're crawling, push your bow forward so that way, if there are any snakes, well, hopefully you won't end up getting bit in the face. Now, lastly, not every shot is gonna be a perfect standing shot. You may have to shoot from your knees, your butt, all sorts of different positions. Practice a variety of positions, be ready for those long shots, and use your bow to help you crawling. You should be all set on your next Western hunt. Okay, so I did it. I got my first muley. You might even say I've got the bug. Now Montana has some big mule deer, but they're not the only state out west with a plentiful supply of bucks. It's time to fast forward to November. The temps have dropped, the rut is on, and I've got a rifle in hand. Colorado is really a hunter's paradise. They have a ton of different animals, but on this trip, well, I had one goal in mind, and that was to go after mule deer. Now, I've never had a chance to take a really big mule deer, and well, let's face it, if you're looking to get a big muley, Colorado is the perfect place. Now, I was doing a late season hunt in Colorado with a rifle. I was super excited. The number of mule deer were extremely high. And the main reason why? Well, we were hunting near the reservation, and a lot of the mule deer will actually migrate down from the higher elevation, coming to look for food. Well, we had the perfect setup because we had huge fields across from us, and we were in an area that was going to be their travel corridor. As we were sitting there, the mule deer started filtering through. And the best part is, it was also the rut. That's one of my favorite reasons for hunting late season. Not only do you get to use a rifle, but you're hunting the rut. And these muleys, well, they're filtering through on their way to the food, but let's face it, the does are going to food and the bucks are just following. Well, I think this morning counts as a perfect definition of a crisp morning. It was 16 degrees when we got out here. It was pitch black. We got here with plenty of time. Now the big buck, he got up right before light and went right into the thick timber. Luckily we had a nice 3x3 come in. Perfect shooting distance, would have been great if he was the big one. Now this evening we're going to try to set something up to get on this buck before it gets too dark. Cut him off a little bit earlier. Gets a little frustrating when you can see this big of a buck and he just won't show himself during good shooting hours. So we decided we had a great setup, we'll just stick it out, but we wanted to move closer. Now there wasn't a lot of places to move closer. We're in an area that, well, there's not exactly a lot of trees for tree stands. So what we decided to do was set up and make our own ground blind. Now we decided just to brush it in, and we found a little knoll that'd give us just enough elevation so we could get up high and be able to see. This morning we saw a really nice buck about 350 yards out. It was just too low a light and too long of a shot. Now what these deer are doing is coming down off of an alfalfa field behind us and moving in, feeding across the fields. So there's no pressure here. There's no reason they won't come back through here this evening. This is a nice little staging area, and we've cut the distance. We've built a nice ground blind, a natural blind, shouldn't have any effect on the deer movement, and should give us a lot closer shot. I really like hunting travel corridors is for the fact that you're going to have a plentiful supply of deer coming through, and they're usually going to come through a little bit earlier. Now if you're hunting a food source, well, sometimes the deer are going to be there super early in the morning and very late at night, and you may not get that nice daytime shot, especially what you need for filming. So a good way is to set up before they get to the food, and that's exactly what we decided to do on this Colorado hunt. We had a funnel set up that we knew most of our shots would probably be inside 200 yards. We're set up in a perfect little brush blind, and we were all ready to go. Now let's face it, the does, well, they were going to food, and the bucks, well, they'll follow them wherever they go this time of the year. So these bucks absolutely had nothing on their mind but following these does. So we knew if we could keep the does nice and calm, well, there's sure to be bucks behind.
Winchester's Deadly Passion is presented by Swarovski Optic, North American Hunting Club, Rage Broadheads, Matthews, Can-Am, Wildlife Research Center, and Hot Mox.
When you're hunting mule deer, one of the key things you need to remember is you have to take time out to get to high points and glass. Now we knew we had a good spot, but a couple of the evenings we decided to go up high so we could watch down below. That way maybe we could have a little bit of an idea of what was going on. Another reason I like it is it gives you a good idea of what type of bucks are in the area. Now the area around Durango, well, there's some really nice bucks. In fact, there was an incredible buck taken by another hunter while I was there on the property that would make anyone want to hold out. Very nice. And I knew that this area should have a good supply of them if I could just be patient. Where we were hunting is actually an area where they have a ton of Texas longhorns. Now it is kind of crazy being that close to some of these giant, beautiful longhorns, but they were everywhere. In fact, sometimes they got a little too close to our blind as far as I was concerned. But, well, it made for nice cover. We had longhorns all around. The deer were completely comfortable. We're hunting an area that has a lot of cattle in it, and it's a smaller tract of land. But if you're hunting the right tract of land, it can be perfect. I don't need huge wide open spaces. The deer constantly come right through this area and are filtering down and heading out to another field. They're pretty patternable at this point in time. So I've decided to hunt these mule deer just like I would a whitetail. Set up on them, have the wind in your favor, and just wait for them to come on through. After seeing a lot of deer come through the travel corridor, well, now the big bucks started coming. We spotted a beautiful buck. When this big 3x4 popped out, well, I knew he was an absolute giant. He was a shooter, no question. And the best part is, well, there were all sorts of other bucks, so it's not like we didn't have other options. In fact, as I was following him, another buck came right by, and he was nice as well. But he looked a little bit younger, and I was set on this big mature buck. Now the hard part is, well, there were a lot of obstacles in the way. I'd have the shot, my cameraman, no, I don't have him. He'd have it perfectly set up, nope, no shot for me. Now as he weaved in and out, I started getting a little nervous. Am I gonna blow it? Am I not gonna get this shot? Next thing I know, there's a Texas longhorn right in the way. So I was really getting worried that this buck was just gonna continue to cruise on through. He's behind a tree right now. Can you see him? I don't have a shot right now. Now I've got a perfect opening. He hits that opening. Now get on him. Get on him. He was playing cat and mouse. I'd have the shot, no shot, moving around. What a beautiful buck. Finally, after many days of patience sitting here, it all worked out. Beautiful, beautiful deer. And we've got more bucks here. There must be a hot doe in there. And like that, the switch flipped. Look at this. Wow, this is a cool buck. I didn't even see this. I saw brows and I thought, he's got some huge brows for a mule deer. Nice, heavy, and a unicorn buck. You don't see that every day. Wow. Now I'd love to tell you that, hey, I saw this unicorn buck way far away and I wanted him. But I had no idea. This wasn't just a small point. He had a big point coming right out of the middle of his forehead. Nothing like having an added surprise and being super happy walking up, plus getting a nice big extra bonus. On almost all my past mule deer hunts, I'm always hunting them spot and stock.
But this guy, I was able to hunt him just like a whitetail, setting up and watching their patterns. Bucks were coming through this area, we were patient, and the patience paid off for one beautiful Colorado mule deer.
Coming up next week on Winchester's Deadly Passion, Melissa takes her bow up to Prince of Wales Island in Alaska on a spot and stalk hunt for black bear. Not only is she hunting one of the best places in the world, she's bringing these big boars in using a predator call. We're talking up close and personal stalks where there's a fine line. Who's the hunter and who's the prey?